Hey, in this video, we're problem solving with equations. To do this, we need to know about inverses. Inverses are opposites. These are the operations we'll be using to solve, and these are their inverses. Let's practice with inverses now. Dividing by 3. The inverse of this is multiplying by 3. Subtracting 6/25. The inverse of that is adding 6/25. Adding 31 and 9/10. The inverse of that is subtracting 31 and 9/10. Multiplying by -8. The inverse of that is dividing by -8. Hey, did you notice how I said all those inverses? I only did the inverse of the operation in front of the number. I did not do the inverse of the number itself. When we're solving equations, we want to find the inverse of the operation and leave the number the same. Oh yeah, the property of equality is super important when we're solving equations also. When we're given equations to solve, they're already balanced. The left-hand expression is equal to or balanced with the right-hand expression. When we're working to solve, we want to keep the equation in balance. So whatever we do on the left, we have to do on the right. Let's go ahead and practice and see what that looks like. Here's our first example. Before we get into the example, let's look over here on the left and look at this information. These are the guidelines we're going to use and the procedures we're going to use to help us solve the equations. The first step is to isolate the variable. Isolate means get the variable by itself. How are we going to do that? We're going to use SMEG. Well, what in the world is that? SMEG is kind of like a checklist. It lets us know what we're looking for and the order that we're looking for these things. So as we go through the equations, the first thing we're going to look for is subtraction or addition. Once we find one of those things, we're going to do the inverse of that on both sides, and then we're going to move to the next level, which is M, multiplication or division. Once we find one of those, we're going to do the inverse of what we see on both sides of equals, and then we're going to move to the next level, exponents, and so on to grouping symbols. So we're always using this 1, 2, 3 procedure to get our work done. Now let's try it on the example. 3r minus 6 equals 24. Our job is to isolate r, or get r by itself, and figure out what it's really equal to. So we're going to use SMEG to help us out. So S means look for subtraction or addition. In our equation, we are subtracting. How much are we subtracting? 6. So the inverse of subtracting 6 is adding 6. And to keep it balanced, we have to add that 6 on the left and the right of equals. That looks like this. You can see that we use the equality property in blue because you see it on the left and the right. What we're going to do now is clean up this line of work and make it easier to read. We're going to do that by combining these inverses here. When we're combining inverses, they give us 0. And once we simplify on the left, we're going to simplify on the right by adding what we see. That's going to look like this. So as you can see on the right-hand side, I calculated 30. On the left-hand side, I crossed out the inverses, but I'm going to take one more step and clean it up so it looks like this. All right, fantastic. Now I'm going to mark off step S. That way we know we did that one and we can move on. Now we're looking for M, which is multiplication or division. So here we have 3r equals 30. Remember, when we have a coefficient in front of a variable, that means multiplication. So we found it. We're multiplying by 3. What's the inverse of multiplying by 3? Dividing by 3. Where are we going to divide by 3? On both sides of the equal sign. That looks like this. I use this little fraction bar to represent my division. So now that we have multiplication by 3 paired with division by 3, those are our inverses. And in this case, they're going to divide away and give us 1 whole. So this is really 1 whole times r, which will give us back r. So we'll simplify like this. So I divided away my inverses, and then that's going to give us an r on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side, we're just going to divide 30 by 3. So we will get this, r equals 10. So we made it through step M. I'm going to check that off. And since we actually have a solution for r, we don't need to look for exponents or grouping symbols. But we're not quite finished. We have to make sure that r equals 10 is the solution that is correct. So we're going to use substitution to check that we're right. To substitute, we're going to take out the r and replace it with 10 because that's what we think it is. So over here is my box to check my work. The first step is to replace r with 10. So instead of 3 times r, I've got 3 times 10. 3 times 10 minus 6 equals 24. In the next row, I'll simplify. 3 times 10 is 30. So 30 minus 6 equals 24. That's a true statement. So r equals 10 is correct. Let's try it again with a different example. So we're going to use the same procedures. Remember, only the numbers change, but the steps don't. So now we're going to isolate the variable in this equation. Negative 5n plus 12 equals 72. We have to figure out what the value of n is. So to do that, let's use SMEG. Let's look for subtraction or addition in our equation. Here we have plus 12. What's the inverse of adding 12? Subtracting 12. Where do we subtract 12? On both sides of the equal sign. That looks like this. You can see I used equality because you see minus 12 on the left and on the right. Let's clean this up by combining our inverses and simplifying the right-hand side. All right, so I combine my inverses by crossing them out because adding your inverses gives you 0, and then 72 minus 12 equals 60. I'll clean it up one more time for you. So it looks like this. And we just took care of S, so I'll mark that off. Now we have to look for M, multiplication or division. Does this look familiar? It should. We've got a coefficient in front of a variable. When you see that, you know that's multiplication. So we're multiplying by negative 5. The inverse of multiplying by negative 5 is dividing by negative 5. And we have to do that on both sides of the equals because that is the equality property. And it looks like this. Okay, so now we're at the point where we have the inverses stacked on top of each other. This is times negative 5, and this is divided by negative 5. So we know in this case, the inverses will divide away and leave us with our variable on the left. After that, we'll have to simplify the division on the right. That'll look like this. So we've divided away our numbers and we have n by itself, and then 60 divided by negative 5 gives us negative 12. So n equals negative 12. I'll go ahead and check off the step we just finished. And now we need to check our solution to make sure it's actually correct. We're going to use substitution again. So we're going to take n out, and in place of n, we'll put negative 12. So negative 5 times negative 12 plus 12 equals 72. Let's simplify the multiplication, and we'll get 60 plus 12 equals 72. 60 plus 12 is 72, so that's a true statement. We did it. Nice work. So when you're working independently, remember to use these steps here that I showed you how to do. Use SMEG. It helps keep your work in order so you don't go out of order and get things all mixed up. Remember to do your inverses on both sides of equals to keep your equation balanced. I hope you take your time and get some paper out and work these problems out, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.